Hi guys, I haven't made a video in a long time. My computer's been broken. It's still broken, but I decided I had too much to say, so I'm making a video anyway. This could be the first in a series of videos I'm calling Fishing Pole Praxis. And basically we're going to be following some games of Brian Wall. He's the undisputed guru of the fishing pole, seeing how he handles different positions, different variations. These are not perfect games. A lot of these are blitz games, although he's played it against higher rated opposition in slow games and done quite well. But we're just going to get an overview, a bunch of quick games, so anybody who's interested in playing fishing pole will see how to go about it. All right, let's get started. We're going to take a look at this first game by, he's playing hobby chess, and this was a 3-minute game, I believe. But Brian's played essentially about, well, I don't know, literally thousands of games. I think he said 50,000 he estimated. I don't know, that seems a little high to me, but who knows? It's quite possible. And so he's the best man to look at. Now, these games aren't perfect. There's going to be improvements for white and for black. But we're going to just plunge right in. Now, anybody who doesn't know what the fishing pole is, well, we'll show you the basic idea, but I have two introductory videos on the fishing pole, and actually a game I played against Gentle Whisper also, if you want to look up more in-depth analysis. These are going to be quick surveys, and based on Brian's analysis and my own analysis. Okay, so let's begin. Okay, the fishing pole is really a tactical device, and it can arise from a number of openings, but it seems to lend itself to the Berlin defense of the Ruy Lopez very easily. We'll take a look here. Okay, so these are the normal opening moves, and the characteristic of the Berlin is knight to f6, and usually black castles at this point, and if he does, then we see the outline of the fishing pole in its purest form right here. And of course, if white takes the knight, then he ends up getting into some difficulty on the H file via this. If he tries to escape, then we do this, and he's pretty much dead. Here's going to be mate and another move. Okay, this is the basis of the trap, and of course many people are wise to this, so a lot of these fishing pole games yes, the fishing pole games involve white being cognizant of what would happen to him if he took the knight, but trying to find a way to do it in real life. Okay, so let's go back to knight to f6. In this particular game, he played d3. And this can happen. Basically, you don't want to play knight to g4 until he's castled. So in the meantime, we can play bishop to c5, d6, and a6. And if he still hasn't castled, we could play like queen to e7, bishop to d7 or g4. But we wait for the red flag of black castling, white castling before we play knight to g4. Okay, so he played d3. Next move is bishop c5. This move is crucial in a fishing pole. The pressure on f2, and oftentimes pinning this pawn is a necessary component of the tactical complications that ensue. Okay, so finally he castles, and that's our cue. Knight to g4. h3 is the instinctive response. Most white players will do this sooner rather than later. The problem is that they get very uncomfortable with this knight being so close, and the direct pressure on f2. So h3 is virtually almost always seen, and this is answered by h5, of course. Now he could take the knight here, and if he did something like this, well, a better move than knight f to d2 would be a knight to g5, impeding the progress of the queen getting to the h file. But again, you can see the outlines of this tactic is always in the background. This is checkmate. So at some other games, we'll look at what happens when the knight goes to g5. This is also part of what black is prepared for here. Okay, a6 was played instead. And naturally, well, he could have taken off on c6, but I think this actually only helps black. If he took on c6 here, we would take with the d pawn. If the d file was open, we would take with the b pawn because we don't want to exchange queens. Queen's kind of necessary for the prosecution of the attack. But in this position and similar positions, we take with the d pawn. This frees our bishop and gets us closer to castling queenside, which is something that happens from time to time. Very rarely do you see black castling kingside in these games, but it actually happens sometimes. All right, so this was another way he could have gone. Instead, he played bishop to a4, bishop to a7. He's anticipating a d4, and he's hiding the knight back here. Actually, one of the functions of a6 is not so much to discomfit the bishop on b5 as much as it is to provide a safe hideout for the bishop on this long diagonal. This bishop is, like I said, is crucial. Okay, so d4 was played anyway, and I talked to Brian about this position. Of course, the classic advice is when there's an attack on the wings, we counter with a movement in the center, and so I'm sure this move is undoubtedly correct. Brian says he rarely will take on d4, but whether to take and what to do after he plays d4 is one of the thorny problems that the black player has to address in these fishing pole games. And sometimes when it's good to do it, sometimes when it's not. In this case, he plays d6, and now the white player, Hobby Chess, who's rated about 21-51, at least at the time of this game, decided to go d5. Now, he could have also gone d takes e5 with the following variation. This is pretty much forced. And here we reach a position where the computers give white a slight edge. But I talked to Brian about this, and he seems to think this line is okay for black. Black has the two bishops. The king is in the center, but that's not so bad. The queens are off the board, so oftentimes we prefer our king to be in the center. And he does have some fractured pawns. Like I said, the computer gives as a plus for white, but only minimally so. So it's certainly a playable position. The material is otherwise equal. And if we know from watching Zibit games that he often allows a fractured pawn center, fractured pawn structure in exchange for the two bishops, and he seems to do very well with that. Note that white cannot play f4 in this position because of this annoying pin from the bishop on b7. Okay, but none of this happened. He played d5, and now I'm sure there's a number of possible. Well, actually, there's only one move here for black. What am I saying? b5 is pretty much forced, and now he could have taken the knight on g4 at this point, which should have led to this position. Knight to g5, again stopping the queen from coming in. The queen goes to f6. He's going to get to He's going to get to the h file via h6, and this is kind of a funny variation. Now the computer gives knight to a3 for white as being the best move. In fact, it's the only move it seems to consider it to be any good. However, I don't think, for some reason, I don't think many players would play this. It just doesn't look like a human kind of move. The knight's in a funny place, and our bishop is hanging on b5. So I can see players playing something like bishop to b3 or bishop to c2 instead. But anyway, this is a computer line. He gives knight to a3, bishop to queen to a6, h6. Now there's a funny dance on the h file. Knight to h3 is the only move to stop mate. And we don't take the piece because our queen is hanging. So we go to g6. I think possibly, not sure what's wrong with queen to h5, but there must be something wrong with it because the computer doesn't give it. So okay, knight to g5, maybe hoping for a draw. I don't know. Now the queen can go to h5, which it wasn't able to do before when it was on f6. And this makes a little bit of a difference. He has to go back. And then we take the bishop that's been hanging here. D takes c6. Get rid of that sideshow. Now back to h7. Because we want to be able to take the knight on h3 without exchanging queens. Queen to e2. G to h3. g4. h2 check. There are other moves probably possible here. King to h1. And okay, so black is he doesn't have an immediate knockout punch, but the Ribka, or I should say Hierarchs, considers this winning by a pawn and a half, something like that. Okay, so this is what could have happened, but did not. So let's go back to the position of the game. b5, d takes c6, and we take the knight, excuse me, we take the bishop. And now he decides that it's safe to take the knight on here. So, but it's really probably not okay. H takes g4. Again, he's blocking the queen coming. f6. Now, actually, it was probably a better move here than f6. F6 is okay, but if we go back a move and play queen to f6, this is better because we're getting our queen to the h file by hook or by crook faster than the f6 line. Okay, so queen to d5 was could be played, considered the best move, and then this this wins. Again, this pawn on f2 is pinned, and this pinned f pawn is a recurring theme in the fishing pole. So you always got to look for it. You can often pull off queen to g3 in some lines, which is extremely satisfying. There's more stuff about that on the other fishing pole videos, which I will link to in the comments. Okay, also he could have played queen to d3 instead. After queen to h6, knight to h3, queen to h5, we get this dance on the h file again. But all roads lead to a win for black from here. So go back to the game. Brian played f6, not the best move, but probably sufficient. Plays e3, bishop to e3. And now, oddly enough, bishop takes e3 is not necessarily the best move. It's probably okay, but stronger was f5. E takes f5. And bishop takes e3, knight to e4, bishop to a7, queen takes g4, queen to h4, queen takes queen, rook takes queen, knight bd2, and bishop takes f5. We reach a position where material is equal and both sides have doubled pawns, although I think black's doubled pawns may be a little bit worse than white's because he's got 3 islands as opposed to 2. But this is winning for black. He'll just move his king off the back rank. He's got the 2 bishops against 2 knights, and he's going to be able to double rooks on the h file. He still has this pin on the f pawn, and the computer considers this winning for black. So back to the game. After he played bishop to e3, then Brian took on e3, which is okay. And then here again, f takes e3. Now, which of us would not take the knight on g5? Probably it's the most natural move in the world. And we have to remember, Brian is a chess master. He's a life master. And he thought this looked pretty good to him. But it turns out it's not the best move. Best move is probably, well, there are 3 good moves that are more or less equally considered by computer analysis. Rook to b8, queen to e7, and f5 are all superior moves. And the reason for this is because this knight is trapped. He cannot save himself by any means. So basically taking him is a waste of a tempo, whereas playing rook to b8 activates the rook. Queen e7 has the intent of clearing the back rank and perhaps casting queenside, and also rounding up the knight where the queen can possibly go to the h file, and f5 threatening f4. And anyway, this was not played, but it could have been played and perhaps should have been played. So after f takes e3, he took the knight, and now we have what's called an Irish pawn chain. This is apparently Grandmaster Tony Miles' name for this particular tripled pawn configuration. And he played knight to d2. Here Brian played queen to e7. I don't know what perhaps the plan is, play g6 and just hop on over to the h file. But perhaps bishop to e6 was a little better, keeping the white knight out of c4 and again clearing the back rank. So, but actually we've been winning for some time now. Queen takes a4 was played. What else is he really well, he could maybe have tried something with knight to c4, but it's really, where is that knight going actually? He'd like to get it on d5 probably, but I'm not exactly sure how he manages that. Perhaps he would have been better off, rather than knight to d2 playing c4 himself, then he could have played knight c4 to d5, and that would have probably been superior than to what he ended up getting. Okay, so queen takes a4 was played, and then g3, setting up mate threats. White recognizes, plays rook to f3, but we have two more soldiers to take the place of the doomed g-pawn now for black. So we move this guy up, he takes, and now the rook is in rather something of an awkward spot. How is he actually going to get out of there? He's more or less trapped. So the queen to h4 is really, it's just it's curtains. This is the only move. Knight to f1, bishop to e6, b3, keeping the bishop out of c4, and then castles was played. This was something of an extravagance on Brian's part. He said that because castles rarely played, he thought it would be fun to play castles here, but a more straightforward win after b3 is just the simple queen to h1 check, and then it's just a route from here. He's losing the knight after rook to f2, and now he's going to lose the rook, and that's just there's no recovery from this position. After castles, black played queen to a5, trying to get something of a threat, but we took the defender of the rook. He takes queen to g3, queen takes c7, queen to e3 check, king to h1, and now after g3, the only way to stop mate is by just tossing all his pieces to slow down the mating attack. And that's the end of the game. Okay, so hopefully I'll be doing 15, 20 of these, showing the different themes in the fishing pole. Hope you enjoyed this. There should be many more to come. All right, thanks.